their souls, right? That's was always Jesus's number one concern, is what's going on in the soul. Where's your heart? And that's where you can look at the data and just see we're dramatically falling away. For the first time in American history, well, actually in the last 60 years, less than half of Americans go to church.
Howdy, and welcome to the True North Leader Podcast. I'm Bobby Albert, and we're here today to talk with Brent Dusing, and he's the founder and CEO of TruPlay. So, Brent, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Bobby.
I think you're going to be really fascinating. Brent and I have we spent longer than I thought we were just chatting. And currently he's living in my state of Texas, in Austin. And so, Brent, tell us a little bit about you, because, man, you've got a fascinating entrepreneur spirit that I relate to. I like to hear about you and what you and your team are doing at TruPlay.
Sure. Well, to start off with, why are we here at TruPlay? We're building a multimedia experience for kids and families that's faith-based and truly world-class. So it contains games, videos, digital comics, and a lot of fun, beautiful, excellent experiences that also contain God's truth. So my background is I grew up in Missouri. I went to college on the East Coast. When I graduated in 2001, I graduated and started my first job right during the dot-com crash. If anybody out there remembers those days, about 21 years ago. And I started out at a venture firm in Silicon Valley. And it was an interesting time because I learned how to invest in a down cycle, which is actually a better time to learn. And in fact, for those of you, maybe for younger listeners, this might be we're going through a down cycle right now. And in a lot of ways, that's a great time to learn to invest because you're investing on fundamentals and not hype. In the dot-com era in the late 90s and 2000, there were a lot of investments being made on, eyeballs and hype. And, well, if you don't give me a deal today, I'll just go down the street 2 hours later and get someone from someone else. There's a lot of that kind of nonsense happening. And while it worked out for some people, ultimately, didn't ultimately proved to be the right way to invest, certainly. So I started out in 2001 doing that. I started my first company when I was 26. It's a company called Cellfire. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and they say use your cell phone to save money or use digital coupons, chances are you used Cellfire. So we had that in all the Kroger and Safeway affiliates all throughout the country and a few other grocers as well. And the way it worked was you could open up the app and use digital coupons. So use coupons directly on your phone. When you checked out, it would clear. And so we had millions of people use it and ultimately sold the company to a company called Catalina Marketing. My second company was a company called Lightside Games, where we built games that were explicitly biblical games, primarily on Facebook. So if anybody remembers the days of a game called Farmville on Facebook, we didn't build Farmville. We built games that were kind of in that same genre, in that style, but that told biblical stories. We did the journey of Moses, then we did the journey of Jesus. We did another game called Stained Glass, which was on mobile. And so everything we did, again, the pillars were, they've got to be fun, they've got to be done with excellence, they've got to be done with beauty, but they've also got to contain God's truth. And so about 4 years ago, I was kind of noticing some things I was observing in society, for children, kids, particularly, that really concerned me. Anxiety, suicide, and depression rates are all-time highs for kids. And that's before COVID. The statistic was true before anybody knew what coronavirus was. And if you look at the charts, it exactly mirrors the rise of social media on smartphones, particularly for teenage girls. I know I was also came upon the statistic that the average male is exposed to pornography when he's 11. And actually 4 years ago, that was 13 years old. So it's getting far worse. And there's all kinds of data, by the way, from Christians, as well as from just secular, scientists and child psychologists, confirming the terrible damage that causes, particularly to young men and men in general. To me, almost the worst stat is that while let me see. Okay. So while 62% of adults of 40, or sorry, people over 40 in America believe in God, only 32% of kids do. Right. So church attendance for the first time in American history, well, for the first time in my and your lifetime, I think it would maybe, in the 1930s, things were pretty grim before Billy Graham's revival started. But in the 1930s, I think it was bad. But for the first time since then, less than half of Americans go to church. Right. So you have 62% of adults over 40 believing in God, which is actually really good for a first world country, but only 32% of kids in this country, which is terrible. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? Is it, it's not because there's some scientific, discovery that God doesn't exist. That's not true at all. And you and I know that. It's that kids get bombarded with messages, and the effects of those things are, the anxiety, suicide, and depression rates, and the pornography exposure, and a whole lot of access to all these other toxic messages that they're on a screen 50 hours a week. Kids are on a screen 50 hours a week, and you ask yourself, well, how often is the average American child at a church? About 30 minutes, because they go to church about an hour. Only half of the kids go to church. And so you have this dichotomy of what they're learning is true based on where they spend their time. And just as the Bible says, the eyes are the window of the soul. And so TruPlay was really birthed on, let's go build content that's truly world-class, truly excellent and fun. And we've got a tremendous team, which I'm happy to talk about, but that also contains God's truth, whether it's biblical stories or a new set of characters we've created. There's a lot of creative ways that we do that, but that's basically a little bit about what we're doing.
Well, Brent, and I know the audience, they may not see it, but you've got an image on your T-shirt, and but perhaps maybe to lead into that is, and you kind of talked about a little bit, is why do you feel passionate about what you and your organization do, and perhaps maybe share a little bit about your mission, and then maybe about the image that's on your T-shirt.
Sure. So to answer your question, why do myself, and we've got a tremendous team here. We have over 100 people working in various capacities, at the company, and a truly world-class team. I mean, people out of some of the very leading companies around, video games and animation production and, art production and those kinds of things. It's a tremendous team, people from big technology companies as well, but also a very dedicated team around the mission. And I think the reason we're so passionate is a few reasons. One, it's a calling. There's so many of us that would tell you, God has called me to this. There's so many people who we have, for example, our recruiters will reach out on LinkedIn and, because we're hiring for all kinds of jobs. And the first response people will tell us is, well, this is something I've been wanting to do for 15 years. And finally, there's a company that's doing this with the level of quality that I want to be able to deliver, but as well as God's truth. There's a lot of, I think, talented people inside the technology industry and in the gaming industry that really have a heart to do this, but that need the organization, the platform to be able to be a part of. So first of all, it's a calling. Second, when you talk to people about, personal hangups they have in their lives or difficulties they've had, they'll often trace it back to, well, something happened in their childhood. Some adult did this to them or did that to them. Those are legitimate, concerns. The thing that bothers me is we're the adults now.
Yeah.
And so, all those facts and statistics I gave you, we say as adults, well, you ask me, what's the most important thing in your life? My family. Okay, great. But boy, if you came in from another civilization and had never met, never seen America in 2022, and you came into it brand new, you sure wouldn't think that. Yeah. I mean, if you look at, again, anxiety, suicide, and depression rates, and, pornography exposure and the lack of exposure to God's truth, and all kinds of things, brain damage that's starting to happen with kids because of drug legalization, you wouldn't think that children were the priority at all. In fact, it's hard to name organizations that look out for the best interest of American kids. Really, there's great organizations for children in countries in need, in developing countries, fantastic places. are fantastic organizations, Compassion International and Samaritan's Purse and World Vision doing great work, but there's not a lot of organizations that exist to serve our kids.
Yeah.
And their needs are just as great. And so they might not be material needs. They might not be, for example, poverty, but their souls, right? That's was always Jesus's number one concern is what's going on in the soul. Where's your heart? And that's where you can look at the data and just see we're dramatically falling away. For the first time in American history, well, actually in the last 60 years, less than half of Americans go to church.
Yeah. So share a little bit about the image on your t-shirt.
Oh, Lucas, yeah. So this is a t-shirt we just got yesterday, and we developed a new set of characters in a world called the Rimverse. So in the Rimverse, it's this fictional world we've created, of course, where God is real and the Bible's true, but there's also real evil that exists, and our characters, our heroes, are kids. And so this is Lucas. Lucas, as you can see, is a skunk, and he has a crocodile robot costume that he designed that flies and shoots laser beams out of its eyes, and he's our inventor. But Lucas actually has a pretty interesting story. His brother died about a year ago, and they used to play walkie-talkie all the time. And now Lucas is 9-10 years old, and he has a lot of questions about God. Where's my brother really? And my mom says he's up in heaven, but where is that? And what does that mean? And how could God have let this happen? So he's got a lot of issues he's wrestling with. Another one of our characters, and there's an animated short we made you can see on our website called Maple in the Forest of Words. There's another one of our characters, a little girl named Maple. She's about 8-9 years old, and Maple is a bunny rabbit that dresses in a tiger costume. And her attitude is she's not always right, but she's never in doubt. She's very strong in her faith. She has very little time for anybody else's opinions. And she, in the video, rushes into the forest on a rescue mission, winds up rescuing a boy who's a fox that dresses in a bear costume. And they wind up discovering together there's this evil queen who's taken over the forest, and through a series of kind of lies and manipulation, twisted really the meaning of words and what's being said in their environment that's led to these terrible effects for society. And so, so each of these characters have their own games, they have their own animations and other ways they appear, and they also have their own stories where they kind of grow and learn and evolve over time, but also going on adventures and, fighting bad guys and saving the day. Yeah.
Well, man, I can see how much fun that would be. And one of the things in a previous business before you sold it, y'all led 25,000 people to the Lord, and I thought that was extremely through people using your gaming process. So I tell you what's interesting to me is the creativity, how creative coming up with these storylines for these characters. And I think the other fascinating thing is you recognize a gap in the market that is desperately needed. And, my wife and I have 3 boys, and of course they're married now, and they have their own families, and our daughter-in-laws are like daughters to my wife and I. Mm-hmm. So they're real special to us. But it's interesting visiting with our sons is you hear that phrase, chip off the old block. Yeah. It's amazing how much they behave like dad. And, one of the things that I talk to our boys about over and over and over, and it relates to what you're trying to do with gaming, is to protect what your eyes see and what your ears hear. And since you're a computer guy and you're pretty smart because you went to Harvard, and so what I meant by that is, when I was in college, this may give my age away here, but when I was in college and I took computer science, now you had a lot of computer science courses. So this was back in the days when we had punch cards.
Yes, I've heard of that. I never saw that, but I heard of that.
Well, you're lucky, because it drove me nuts, because when you start putting those punch cards in, they jam up. Then you have to rerun the program again, and it would just drive me nuts. And it was very time consuming. It was ridiculous when I look back on it. But a term we used back then was garbage in is garbage out.
Yeah, yeah.
And the application is exactly what you're trying to do, because our minds are so ripe, especially kids and young adults are so ripe. They don't know it, but they're really thirsting for God's truth.
Yes.
They don't come out and say, I'm thirsty for God's truth, but what I would talk about are boys in a practical sense. Boys, and we had house rules. It wasn't until our youngest son that I actually wrote them out. I talked with him verbally, but it's like, you gotta, they knew I was going to ask them about what movies are they looking at?
Sure.
What books are they reading? What magazines are they looking at? What friends do they hang out with? What kind of language their friends use? What kind of jokes do they tell? Hey, when you get in the car on Friday night, you already know how the night's going to turn out. So make a decision now,
right,
if you're going to get in that car, with them.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why I brought up about our three sons, because I can see them playing out, protect what your eyes see, what your ears hear, even with their own children. They're very protective.
Yes. Yeah. But it's harder, Bobby, than it was. So, I grew up in the 80s, and, if you think about it, like access to pornography was, you had to, as a kid, you had to go to a friend's house whose dad had a magazine and sneak in the middle of the night, right? Or to buy certain music, you had to produce an ID to prove you were over 18, right?
Yeah.
Or to rent certain movies, right? Or to get into the movie theater, right? You had to show you over 18. There were restrictions. The thing now is there's so much content that's so readily available through a quick Google search, through the App Store, where you can get so much of that content instantly that's so toxic, particularly for children. And so, the problem now is when you hear, anxiety, suicide, depression rates are all-time highs, the message is, but parents should just police what their kids do. Okay, we legalized drugs in this certain area, and now we're showing there's brain damage in kids, particularly disadvantaged kids, actually. There's an instance of increase in those places. Well, what about that? Well, parents should just do a better job. Okay. What about the fact that the average male exposed to porn when he's 11? Well, parents should just do a better job. It's kind of like telling a parent, if they say you lived on a beach town, hey, there's going to be a hurricane. Oh my gosh, what should I do? Hey, no problem. Just go to the beach and hold up your arms. I mean, that's what it's like to raise children. I have 3 kids of my own, now you've got some grandkids, and I'm sure that's what the experience is like for your sons. The screens are so prevalent. Yeah. And there's so much access to information so quickly. And it's not just people say, but there's parental controls and blockers. Yeah. And then you wait till they get a little older. Yeah. They're at a friend's house. They're on a school bus.
Exactly.
Right. And it's right there. And so there really is, that's why I think there's so much responsibility that has to be taken by content creators and platforms, and not just continue to scapegoat parents. Because as TruPlay, we want to come alongside parents. Nobody's we're certainly not here to blame parents. We're here to affirm and say, here's great content. Here's a place you can trust.
Yeah.
That's going to, that your kids are going to love. We're not selling Robitussin. Robitussin is, I know this doesn't taste very good, but you should drink it. It'll help your cough. We don't sell that, right? At TruPlay, it's chocolate cake stuffed with vitamins and calcium and protein. So the kid wants to engage, wants to get involved. And the parent's great with it because they look at all the benefits that are coming as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, our three boys, my wife and I looked at our home as a ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we had, you mentioned about movies, like, you had to check, what age you were before you could go in on some of them. And, but we had part of our way of living is, we told our boys, we don't permit R-rated movies. And certain, age levels on playing games that they were playing. And it got, we created a home that was fun to be there. The refrigerator was full of, Cokes or other drinks and all kinds of food there. We had a swimming pool. We had a basketball goal. We had a fort when they were younger. They could climb around in. Yeah. So they were constantly inviting friends over to our house. But we created all of that because we saw our home using our home as a mission rather than it's just a house that. And so our boys were very good at telling their friends when they come over, like, hey, when you come over, we're not going to watch these kind of movies.
Sure.
And it became a safe place for other kids to come.
So it's interesting for you to say that, Bobby, because your house was a safe place for your kids and their friends. That's what we're building at TruPlay. It's a safe place for kids because, as a parent, again, it's convenient for content creators and platforms to blame parents and put the burden on parents. But I can tell you as a parent, as I'm sure most of your listeners would agree, you don't always have time to play every game and watch every movie first and look at every YouTube video. You don't have the time or the bandwidth because life's busy enough. And so what TruPlay is providing is the ability for it to be a place your kid wants to be, that's safe, a safe place, a safe environment, for them, but not just safe, but a place that's really going to help grow and encourage them in God's truth.
Yeah. There's a quote, and I wish I could remember. It's a lady, and she had multiple, she had three names to her, and I can't remember the names right now, but what we're talking about, what her quote is prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child.
Yes.
And, I think you understand this. So many parents today are trying to prepare the path rather than preparing the child.
Yes.
And so what you're doing with your gaming, helping paint, you mentioned the word safe. It's a safe place for parents to allow them to use the gaming to help prepare the child for their path of life that they're going to live in this, in this world, rather than trying to clean up the path all the time behind them, like going to school and, trying to, help Johnny get a better grade. That's preparing the path.
That's right.
Instead of preparing the child for the path of doing the right things. And there's another challenge, and this is many. In fact, I'm probably going to kind of reveal my age here again. There's an old Christian band called Phillips, Craig and Dean, And
Yeah,
I
they're
don't,
here in Austin. I mean, Randy Phillips is right here in Austin.
okay.
He's 15 minutes away from my office in his church. Yeah.
Well, you know, if you see him, you can tell him, I still remember this old song, and it told a story. Since you're into your characters and things, and what the story was, and I can't remember the name of the song, but it's a dad that was tucking in his son in bed at night,
Mhm.
praying with him. And then as he walked away from the bed and he's about ready to turn off the light, he started praying, Lord, I want to be like you because he wants to be like me.
Mhm.
And I tell you what, it really, if I can use a music term, it struck a chord
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah.
And it made it very clear. My wife and I were already doing this, but it really confirmed that as a parent, the rules we were wanting to teach our children to live by, we had to live by them too.
Yeah. That's right.
It's kind, you know, I mentioned about we don't go to R-rated movies.
Sure.
Well, my wife and I have lived by that, you know, probably now for, you know, I don't know, 35 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And still today, we
Yeah.
live by that. And I allowed myself to attend one R-rated movie, and it was the Passion for Christ
Sure. Sure.
movie. So, which I was surprised, but I can understand there's a lot of gory
Well,
details.
I mean, that movie, it's funny you bring that up. So that movie was a really big part of me becoming a believer. So I'd grown up going to a church and believed that God existed. But as you know, there's a difference between believing that God exists and following Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
And I went to this church in California, in Silicon Valley at the time, as about 20 years ago. And I was asking the pastor all these types of questions, what does the Bible say about this? And what's the reason for that? And the pastor showed me things I'd never been exposed to in the church that I grew up in. But, Psalm 22, where, written 1,000 years before Christ, where the crucifixion is laid out in detail by David. Isaiah 53 about the virgin birth, the Daniel and the prophecies in Daniel. And it started to become really black and white. Wow, there's really this God of the universe that supersedes even time. And so if that's true, then I need to be sure to get right with him, right? Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I didn't think fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but now I realize that was the point. And the other thing that got to me was the movie, The Passion of the Christ, because it was depicted the crucifixion in such a real way.
Yes.
And it's terrible to say, but when you grow up in Christendom, right, in Western civilization, you always see a cross, you see a church.
Yes.
But it's kind of that you never really get a sense of what really happened. It's kind of like this generally accepted cultural thing rather than kind of explaining and diving into the detail of why it mattered and how terrible it was, a sacrifice it really was. Yeah. So seeing it depicted in that way really opened my eyes to the sacrifice that Jesus made for all of us. And the other thing it did is it really spurred, as I was saying earlier, if you look at that movie, it was highly engaging. You're riveted to it, even though you know exactly what's going to happen. Right? There's no twists in that movie, but you're hooked into it because the way he tells the stories, the quality of the acting. The characters don't speak English; they speak Aramaic. But you're great acting, great cinematography, great music, and it stood for 15 years as the #1 R-rated movie of all time by box office receipts. Right?
Is that right?
Yeah. And so, but it was really about, and by the way, though, it adhered to biblical truth. I mean, sure, Mel Gibson took some liberties in that movie, but the truth is the core of the story and the movie and what happened really was based on, the Bible, the gospel. And so that was really a nice touchstone for us to say, look, everything we do has got to be of high quality. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be done with beauty, but it's also got to contain God's truth as the foundational layer.
Yeah. I like you bringing up about Psalms. In the early part of Psalms in my daily quiet time right now, you're exactly right. a lot of the description that David was writing and perhaps singing in those early Psalms it really kind of gives a picture of what Jesus Christ was experiencing with, you know, the people that were attacking him, the hypocrites, the one that were lying about him. You know, in today's term, you know, we would say using smoke and mirrors, you know, to get at him. It's and you see a lot of that today that's going on. And so man, there's notes all over my Bible. Brent, man, I'm loving this discussion. I'm going to change the subject here a little bit. And can you share a story about an obstacle that challenged you and your team, and tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, an obstacle that challenged my team and I. You know, one of the kind of things that we had to think about as a team is, you know, we're building a platform that has a whole bunch of content. So we're building the platform as well as the content. You know, there's not a lot of great Christian content for kids out there. There's very, very little that's of high quality. And so there's not a lot of things that we could just go buy. So we have to go build it. So we have to build that as well as the platform itself. And so, you know, what I try to tell people, and this might be helpful for a lot of people who listen to this that are entrepreneurs, you have to remember that when you're doing a business like this, you're actually going through three-dimensional growth. And here's what I mean. You're building a new product. And everybody who starts a new company understands that, because, you know, it's pretty obvious we're building a product. But the second dimension is we're building a company. And so what building a company means often is your job, you know, Joe Smith, the job he got hired to do in March, by September may change. So I was like, hey, Joe, when you started in March, you didn't do these 5 things, but now I only need you to do these 3. And sometimes that can look like emotionally from Joe, well, that's not fair, and you took my responsibilities away. No. Because I need you to really focus on these 3 things, because those 3 things are now being used by 1 million people around the world. And those other 2 things we've had to hire people for to take over for you, right? So as a company scales, right, who you report to changes, your responsibilities change, all those types of things. And then the third dimension is personal growth, because you know, we hire people here with experience in their fields. We don't typically hire people right out of college, because as a startup, we don't have time to train you to do a job for the first time. While it's true that nobody's built what we're building at TruPlay before, it's also true that there are components of what we're building that have been done, right? So you're taking people in from their different disciplines: art, game design, software engineering, and, you know, project management. And people with these high levels of expertise, recruiting, are able to come into TruPlay and apply their expertise to build a great company or great product. But that also means their personal growth and development will evolve as well. And so I think as a leader of an organization, you've got to be sure that you're messaging three-dimensional growth and trying your best to provide opportunities for that.
Yeah, that's, you know, you're sharing some great stuff. You know, you think in terms, when you hear the word entrepreneur, you think of business, but a pastor could be an entrepreneur, leading people to Christ.
Well, if you're doing a church plant, that's exactly being an entrepreneur, right?
Oh, it sure is. Exactly. And the struggles they go through, you know, and they're trying to scale, and, you know, but something I saw, it's been several months ago, that it was something kind of like this: about like 80% of the churches had 200 and less people.
Yes.
It was something like that from Barna Research. And what occurred to me, and it sounds like what you're saying can happen. It doesn't matter if it's a church or even a nonprofit. It could even, you know, an educational institute, let's say a Christian academy, you know, K through 12 or something. So one of the things that I teach is called on and in. And what I've found is that 85%, 85 to 90% of the leaders are working their tail off in the business,
The business,
or
not
in
on
the
the business,
church,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
or in the ministry, or, you know, they're working in, and they lose sight to work on the
Yes.
organization.
Agree.
And, but it's not either or. As you're just, you know, I'm using some terms that to describe what you were saying, but I mean, while you're working in your business, you're working on your business so you can scale it.
That's right.
And unless, particularly somebody in your role, and I found this, like for me, it reached a point where almost 100% of my time was working on our business, but I had to hire the right people. And like Jim Collins said, get the right people
Yes.
in the right seat, the wrong people, all, you know, in the
Right.
right seat of the bus,
Right.
get the wrong people off,
That's right.
and in the right seat, going in the right direction.
I agree,
And
Bobby. Absolutely. I think that, you know, it's true for entrepreneurs, but, you know, you spoke about pastors, and I think as a Christian church, we can all do better supporting and affirming our pastors.
yeah,
You know, I often think that I see congregants do this all the time. They expect pastors to adhere to a standard which they wouldn't themselves agree to, but they expect to compensate and support them at a lower level than they would accept.
yeah,
And so I think for pastors, if you think about it, a lot of them, especially those at smaller churches, you know, you're expected to be a counselor, run the church, be the chief fundraiser, be the best speaker of the sermons, be the
Yeah.
biblical authority when there's a dispute. You know, that's a lot of burden to place on one person. And while I'm sure there are some people who can do all that, I don't think it's fair to expect everyone who is called to the ministry to have to do all those things. And so the ability to hand things off, the ability to find people you can trust, and who are competent, by the way, which is so key, is to trust with the handoff is so key. And I think that as congregants, you know, if you're going to a church, of a small church where the pastor's doing too much, where can you help? You know, how can we help support our pastors who are called to pastor us?
Yeah. Well, and there's some mindset that you've got to hire and pay a staff, but there's a lot of people in the church that would be willing to volunteer, just like you're saying, to do it. Now, they may not, you know, they have another job and they've got a family perhaps, but they can take you to another level before you have to hire somebody, and willing to do it, and do it as unto the Lord, not just you know, just volunteering.
That's right.
And that's a key thing. Is, if I can share this about our company, when I started seeing my work as a ministry and not a job, I took our traditional organization chart that had me at the top. Of course, that signals to all the employees they come to work for Bobby Albert. But I took it and turned it upside down. And I took of the servant leader role, and I took the role to serve, develop, and equip the leadership team. And they knew they were supposed to do that to people that reported them all the way. And we had the frontline people at the top of the organization chart. But above the frontline people was the customer. And even above the customer was the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes. And
Colossians 3:23-24 was the foundational verse for our company. And so, which talks about it's the Lord Jesus Christ we're serving. So our people clearly knew. It's kind of like, you know, what Jesus said, I'm paraphrasing this. to his disciples, I come not to be served, but to serve. And,
Yes.
and so, but that was a key of our culture, of our organization, is it was like I could not outserve our people because they kept giving back to me results that were extraordinary, soaring results that people would dream about having. And, you know, part of our culture, this sounds weird when you think about a business, but our people had a passion. They were excited. They were enthusiastic to come to work every day, even though
Sure.
they had their own personal problem.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after I sold the company, I spent months praying, Lord, why was things working so well? And he helped me understand. He only gave me one word, and that was serve. Because that's how we demonstrate God's love. And so it helped me understand in a deeper way that the reason why you can't buy people, you can't buy passion, excitement, enthusiasm
That's
in
right.
the workplace.
That's right.
Especially nowadays when, you read so much about employees being disengaged, quiet quitting, being quiet, but quitting on their jobs and things.
Yeah.
But our people were experiencing something I didn't quite understand at the time, was the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ and in our workplace. And they couldn't express it to me. I didn't recognize it. But one thing I found is I struggled trying to get our people to find a church home. And I finally figured out they felt like they came to church 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So it didn't really occur, but our ministry, seeing our work, was so prevalent. It started out in the workplace for employees, but we began to figure out how to minister to customers and even suppliers. And we had, not as large as yours, but we had tens of thousands of customers, and we had about 3,000 suppliers. You may call them contractors.
Sure.
Because we had more business across the country as well as internationally, and we could handle. So, but we figured out ways how to minister to them. We had so much ministry activity in a business that we had to hire an extra person in our HR, human resource department, just to handle the logistics of all the ministry activity. So this all comes back about working on your business while you're working in your business. You could instead of business, you could put church, or your nonprofit ministry, or your educational institution. So, well, one thing, Brent, if I might ask another question here, and you kind of we've covered a lot on this, but I just want to ask if there's anything else to add, is how has your faith influenced the way you approach, that you lead your team?
Oh, tremendously so, because we're doing, what we're doing is really mission. We're applying Silicon Valley operating principles that I learned for years to go accomplish a Christian mission. That's essentially what we're doing, because we're a mission-based, organization. And so the ability to, you've got to do your best. Think about the biblical examples of Noah's Ark. Okay, so Noah had to go build the ark. Yeah. And the Bible doesn't say, well, they got sloppy and then there were holes in the side and then it sank, right? No, they did a good job. It took them a long time, but They built it well, or the temple, right? The first temple that's described, Solomon's temple, where again, it's not like, oh yeah, they messed up and a column fell off and the whole thing collapsed. No, they took their time, but they obviously built with excellence. They worked hard. They built with purpose.
Yes.
Nehemiah is all about building the wall, and again, that was built
Yes.
successfully. So the point is that you've got to build with excellence and hard work and do your best, but there are also components where you've got to trust God to show up. That's true in the building of the temple, where God provides all these wealth and resources for them to do it. Or Nehemiah, God kind of stirs the heart of the king to let Nehemiah go leave captivity and bring people with him, and kind of protects them as they're building it, when I think Sanballat and some of the other villains are trying to kind of corrupt and connive. And so the point is that you're working with God.
Yeah.
And so you've got to kind of operate in that way, and let the people here do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hearing you talk, if I can come back to Psalms, it's a favorite verse. I have a testimony with it, but it's Psalms 27 verse 14, and it said, "Be patient and wait on the Lord." And it not only says it once, but it says it twice in that one verse. And what was so hard is I'm extremely impatient. You probably relate as an entrepreneur.
As are many of us with a type A personality, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm impatient. And in fact, when I look back when I was a little boy, I was what they would call today, I was ADD, and I still care it as an adult. And you combine that being impatient. I was also visionary. I can tell you're visionary and what being an entrepreneur. And when I see way out there what's opportunities, a gap in the marketplace, like we were talking about, it's so real to me. It's like, I got to do this right now. See, that's that impatient nature. So it's been always challenge for me to be patient and wait on the Lord. But it's kind of like you're saying, it's, the Lord's there, but we got to tap in to the power source, and he will put employees in our hands. He would put ideas. He would put how to do things. He'll put it in you. And we just got to wait for him to do those kind of things. So, hey, Brent, now looking toward the future, what is one potential opportunity or obstacle that you see on the horizon, and why does this need to be talked about?
You mean related to TruPlay? Potential obstacle?
Yes, or anything else that you want to talk about?
I mean, look, I guess I would just say that we're, at TruPlay, we're releasing our product in 2023. Next year, we're building a lot of great content, games, video content, digital comics. We'll have a lot of merchandise out as well for children and families everywhere. And it's really about, delivering excellence and fun and God's truth. And if people want to get involved, they can go to TruPlayGames.com and enter their email on our website. They can follow us on social media. We have a pretty large presence now on Twitter and Discord, on Facebook or Instagram. So we'd encourage people to come on board, get involved. If you're into the crypto space, you can buy an NFT. If you buy an NFT, TruPlay gets 10% of it. So it's a way for people to get involved and help support that as well. So there's a lot of ways. We're really building a movement. We've heard so much demand. I talk to parents all the time, and I talk to Christian parents as well as non-Christian parents. And there's so much demand for TruPlay because of all the things we've talked about today, that, we want to invite people to get involved in our movement, follow us, give us feedback. There's opportunities to test, by the way, products before they come out, to share content with people, to help spread the word. So really appreciate everybody who's, been listening to this today.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all of that. And we will have in our show notes how people can connect with you. And Brent, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. And I look forward to seeing more of your products that you've got coming out.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, Bobby. Good to get to know you today and appreciate it.
All right.